Hi everyone, welcome to Talk Easy. Today Catherine and Mike will explain how to form questions like, do you like coffee? And negatives like, I don't like coffee. Learn tips to handle word order easily. Let's begin.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling something that you use every single day.
Yeah.
Maybe without even thinking about it too much.
Right.
And that is English word order. We're going to be focusing in on how we build questions
Okay.
and negative sentences in English.
Sounds good.
Now you might be thinking, well, I already know how to ask a question. I do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But trust me, there's a whole lot more going on under the surface.
Yeah. What's really fascinating about English is that word order.
Yeah.
It's not just about being grammatically correct.
Right.
It actually, it's the foundation of the meaning of the sentence.
Uh-huh.
So unlike some languages that use lots of inflections,
Okay.
so, changes to the ends of words
Yeah.
to show, how words relate to each other grammatically, English relies heavily on where each word sits in a sentence.
This is like the foundation of a house.
Mm-hmm.
If you get the foundation wrong,
Yeah.
the whole thing's going to fall over.
Exactly.
So I can see why that would be super important for somebody learning English as a new language.
Uh-huh.
But for those of us who maybe, grew up speaking English, why should we really care about getting this word order thing down?
Well, I think it's the difference between just throwing ingredients together
Okay.
and, carefully crafting a recipe.
Right.
You might get something edible if you just throw ingredients together. But,
Yeah.
with a recipe, you have much more control over the flavor, the texture, the overall impact.
Yeah.
And I think with English word order, if you get it right, you can make your sentences much clearer, more emphatic, and even more stylish if you know how to play with the rules a little bit.
Ooh, okay. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with unpacking all this word order stuff? Our sources talk about questions and negative sentences.
Let's start with questions.
Okay.
I mean, that's how we explore the world. It's how we, satisfy our curiosity, and it's how we connect with other people. But have you ever stopped to think, what is the mechanics of how we form these questions?
Oh, not really.
It all boils down to this, elegant little dance between the subject of the sentence,
Okay.
who or what is doing the action,
Uh-huh.
and the auxiliary verb,
Okay.
which is basically the helper verb
Right.
that gives you all this extra meaning to the main verb.
I'm already picturing like a waltz, but with words instead of people.
Yeah,
This dance is probably a little bit different depending on the tense that we're using, right?
absolutely.
Okay.
Think of tenses as different tempos for our word waltz.
I love it.
So let's start with the present simple tense,
Okay.
which is what we use for habits, routines, facts about the world.
Yeah.
To make a question in the present simple, we need to invite our trusty auxiliary verbs do and does to the party.
Okay. So instead of saying, I eat breakfast every day, we
Mhm.
say, do you eat breakfast every day?
Precisely.
Okay.
And notice how does steps in when we have what's called a third person singular subject, like he, she, or it.
Right.
For example, does she enjoy spicy food?
So do and does are like those friends that always show up to help you rearrange your furniture.
Right.
And in this case, the furniture is our words.
Yeah, exactly.
But what about when we use the past simple? Do we still need a helper verb there?
We do indeed.
Okay.
This time, our steadfast helper is did.
All right.
No matter who's doing the action, did always takes the lead when we're asking a question about something that happened in the past.
Okay.
So, did you see the latest blockbuster? Or did they travel to Europe last summer? Okay. All follow this same pattern.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It seems like there's an underlying structure,
Mhm.
like almost a formula that's consistent even as we shift these tenses around.
Yeah.
What happens when we jump into the future then?
Ooh.
I feel like our word waltz is getting a little bit more futuristic.
I like where your head's at.
Okay.
You're right. The future tense brings in its own unique step to the dance.
Uh-huh.
Our auxiliary friend will. So when we want to ask a question about something that's yet to come,
Yeah.
we lead with will, followed by the subject and then the main verb.
Okay.
Like, will you join us for the concert?
All right.
Or will they arrive on time for the meeting?
Okay. I'm starting to see the pattern here.
Good.
But what about when we want to ask more specific questions? Like who did something or where something happened or why something is the way it is?
Okay.
I mean, those are still questions.
Yeah.
but it feels like they need more than just like a do, deed, or will.
You're right. That's where our question words,
Uh-huh.
who, what, where, when, why, and how,
Right.
come into play.
Okay.
And they don't just add information, they actually dictate the structure of the whole question.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they always take the lead, kicking off the inquiry,
Uh-huh.
setting the stage for the rest of the sentence to follow.
So it's like they're the opening act, getting the audience all ready for the main performance.
Exactly.
I like that. Can you give me an example?
Absolutely. Think about, what time does the movie start? Mm-hmm.
Or where did you find that amazing vintage jacket?
Right.
You know, those question words immediately tell us what kind of information we're looking for.
Yeah.
And the rest of the sentence just falls into line accordingly.
This is making so much sense.
Good.
It's like those question words have like a superpower
Yeah.
to shape the whole sentence around them.
They're like the architects of the question.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, they determine the blueprint and the rest of the words just fall into place.
So we've covered the basic formula for questions.
Yeah.
From just like simple yes-no questions to ones with more specific question words in them.
Mm-hmm.
But our sources also talk about something called tag questions.
Oh, yeah.
What are those all about?
Oh, tag questions. They're like the sprinkles on top of a cupcake.
Okay.
They just add that little touch of sweetness
All right.
and make the whole thing a little bit more appealing.
Okay, I'm picturing a cupcake now.
Good.
So these tag questions are like those little additions
Yeah.
we tack on to the end of statements.
To confirm information or like seek agreement or just add a little personality.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example?
Absolutely. I imagine you're like admiring a beautiful sunset with a friend.
Okay.
You might say, it's a stunning sunset, isn't it?
Okay.
That little isn't it invites your friend to kind of like share your appreciation.
Yeah.
You're creating a moment of connection.
Right.
Or let's say you're at a party
Okay.
and you think you recognize someone from your yoga class.
Okay.
You could say, you take yoga at the community center, don't you?
Right.
It's a way of confirming your suspicion, but also striking up a conversation.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like these little tag questions turn a statement into like an invitation
Mm-hmm.
to engage.
Exactly.
They're like little conversational bridges.
Yeah, I like that.
Is there a specific formula for creating them?
Yeah.
Or is it more of a free-for-all?
There's definitely a formula.
Okay.
And it's surprisingly simple.
All right.
You basically just echo the verb tense from the main statement and add a tag that's the opposite
Opposite of what?
in polarity.
Okay.
So if the statement's positive, the tag's negative, and vice versa.
Okay, so if I say, you love learning about language,
Yeah,
the tag would be, don't you?
exactly.
But if I say, you haven't finished that grammar book yet,
All right,
it'd be, have you?
you got it.
Okay.
It's like this little grammatical dance
Yeah.
where the statement and the tag mirror each other,
Uh-huh.
but with opposite energy.
Right.
And just like with any dance, the more you practice, the more natural and effortless it becomes.
I love it. This is so cool.
Yeah,
I'm starting to notice tag questions everywhere I look now.
right.
It's like I've unlocked this secret code.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered questions in like all their forms,
Mm-hmm.
from the simple ones to the more complex ones,
Right.
from straightforward to sprinkled with personality.
Right.
Now, what about negative sentences?
Okay.
Are there any hidden depths there?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Negation in English might seem simple at first glance,
Okay.
but it also has its own set of rules and
Right.
nuances that can really trip you up
Right.
if you're not careful.
Okay.
And just like with questions, word order plays a starring role here.
All right, I'm ready to dive into the world of no.
Okay.
Where do we begin?
So the fundamental rule
Yeah.
for forming negative sentences in English
Uh-huh.
is to add not
Okay.
after the auxiliary verb.
All right.
So instead of saying I am happy, we say I am not happy.
Right.
The basic structure stays the same.
Yeah.
We're just like inserting this little no into the equation.
So it's like adding a pinch of salt to a recipe.
Exactly.
It doesn't change the ingredients,
Yeah.
but it definitely changes the flavor.
Right.
I'm guessing this not placement can get a little more complex,
It can.
depending on the tense we're using.
Absolutely. Let's start with the present simple.
Okay.
Our go-to tense for everyday actions and facts about the world.
Yeah.
Here, we need to bring back our auxiliary friends do and does,
Right.
but this time with a twist. They're
Oh.
joined by not.
Okay, so instead of I like coffee,
Yeah,
it becomes I do not like coffee.
exactly.
For the third person singular.
Yeah,
She does not like horror movies.
you got it.
Oh.
And of course, in everyday speech, we often use the contractions don't and doesn't
Yeah.
to keep things flowing smoothly.
Yeah.
But the word order remains the same.
Okay.
Not always comes right after that auxiliary verb.
It's like not is glued to that auxiliary verb,
Yeah.
always sticking by their side.
Mm-hmm.
But what about in the past simple?
Okay.
Does dad also get a not companion?
It certainly does.
Right.
When we're talking about something that didn't happen in the past,
Yeah.
did not, or its contraction didn't,
Okay.
is our go-to helper.
Right.
And just like in questions, did is the universal helper for the past simple.
Okay.
Regardless of who's doing the action.
Got it.
So we didn't finish the project on time, or he didn't attend the conference.
So did is like that reliable friend that's always there to lend a helping hand, whether you're asking a question or expressing a negative.
Exactly.
Now, what happens when we zoom into the future?
Okay.
Does will get in on this not action?
It most certainly does.
Right.
When we want to say that something will not happen in the future,
Yeah.
we use will not, or its more common contraction, won't.
Okay.
For instance, I won't be able to make it to the party, or they won't be arriving until tomorrow.
So won't is like the ultimate nope for the future.
Exactly.
But what about when we want to combine those inquisitive question words
Yeah.
with our negative sentences?
Okay.
Does the word order get all jumbled up then?
That's a great question.
Okay.
And the answer might surprise you.
All right.
The structure remains remarkably consistent even when we throw question words into the mix.
Really?
Yeah, let's take a present tense example.
Okay.
Why don't you try a new recipe?
Okay.
Or a past tense example. Why didn't they inform us about the delay? The question word still leads the charge, followed by the auxiliary verb and its trusty sidekick, not.
So it's like not has this reserved seat right next to the auxiliary verb, no matter what other words are joining the party.
Exactly.
But, our sources also talk about something called double negatives, which I've heard are a big no-no in English.
Right.
What's the deal with those?
So you're right. Double negatives are generally frowned upon in standard English. They can sound informal or even ungrammatical.
Okay.
It's like trying to emphasize a point
Yeah.
by saying no twice.
Right.
And it kind of ends up canceling itself out
Okay.
and creating confusion.
So saying something like, I don't need no help,
Yeah.
would actually imply that you do need help.
Exactly.
Wow.
It creates this kind of like grammatical double negative that reverses the meaning.
Okay.
So the correct way to express that would be, I don't need any help, or I need no help.
Got it.
One not per negative sentence is the golden rule.
So one is enough
Yeah.
to get your point across.
Right.
Are there any situations, though, where a double negative is actually acceptable?
There are a few.
Okay.
So in some dialects of English, double negatives are used for emphasis
Okay.
or to create a particular like rhythmic effect.
Right.
And in some like literary contexts, writers might use double negatives to convey a character's voice
Okay.
or to achieve a certain stylistic effect.
So it's like any other grammatical rule.
Yeah.
There are always exceptions.
Right.
And creative ways to play with language.
Exactly.
But I guess for most situations, sticking to that one not per sentence rule is probably a safe bet.
It's all about knowing the rules so you can break them strategically
Right.
when you want to create a specific effect.
Okay, so we've covered the basics of negative sentences.
Yeah.
From the simple placement of not
Right.
to those tricky double negatives. But I'm curious, are there any more, like, advanced techniques or nuances when it comes to negation that we haven't even touched on yet?
There are indeed.
Ooh, okay.
Let's delve into a few more intriguing aspects of negation
All right.
that can add a little finesse and sophistication to your English expression.
Okay, I'm all ears.
All right, one technique that often catches learners off guard
Yeah.
is the use of negative questions.
Okay.
They might sound a bit counterintuitive at first,
Yeah.
but they're actually quite common in everyday speech.
Oh, yeah, I remember struggling with those.
Yeah.
They're the ones that sound like they're already assuming something right.
Exactly.
Like, don't you love the smell of freshly baked bread? It almost feels like a statement disguised as a question.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
Negative questions often express surprise or disbelief or a desire to confirm an assumption.
Yeah.
It's like saying, I'm almost certain this is true, but I'm just checking.
Oh, so it's less about genuinely seeking information and more about kind of subtly nudging the listener towards a certain response.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Are there any specific rules for forming these mind-bending negative questions?
The structure is actually remarkably similar to regular questions, followed by the auxiliary verb and its ever-present companion, not.
It's like not is the ultimate wingman
Yeah.
for those auxiliary verbs, always there to back him up, no matter what kind of question they're asking.
I love that analogy. It really captures the dynamic
Yeah.
between those two grammatical elements.
Right, so we've demystified these negative questions.
Yeah.
They're not as intimidating as they seem at first glance.
Hopefully not.
But what about when we want to express negation in a more nuanced way
Okay.
without actually using the word not?
That's where the beauty of English really shines through.
Okay.
We have a whole toolkit of negative words and prefixes
Uh-huh.
that allow us to express negation without ever uttering the word not.
Okay. I'm officially intrigued.
Ah.
Tell me more about this secret language.
All right, so think about words like never,
Okay.
nobody, nowhere, nothing. They're
Right.
all inherently negative,
Yeah.
conveying a sense of absence or lack of something. And then we have prefixes like un and dis, in,
Oh.
which we can attach to words
Yeah.
to reverse their meaning.
Great.
So, for example, happy becomes unhappy, possible becomes impossible, and
Wow.
agree becomes disagree.
It's like we have this whole arsenal of linguistic tools
Yeah.
for expressing negativity,
Mhm.
each with their own subtle shade of meaning.
Exactly.
I'm starting to realize that negation in English is a lot more complex
It is.
and fascinating than I ever imagined.
It's not just about saying no.
Right.
It's about choosing the right tool for the job, the
Yeah.
right shade of negativity to convey your intended meaning
Okay.
with precision and style.
This is making me want to go back and analyze all my favorite books and movies just
Yeah.
to see how they're using these different forms of negation.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so we've explored the depths of negative sentences,
Mm-hmm.
from basic structures
Uh-huh.
to those sneaky double negatives,
Right.
and even those nuanced, not-free expressions.
Yeah.
But what about those tricky situations
Okay.
where word order seems to just go out the window?
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking specifically about questions that start with who or what.
Okay.
Sometimes they feel like they have a mind of their own.
You're right. Those who and what questions can be a bit of a puzzle.
Yeah.
They often deviate from the standard subject-verb-object order that
Mhm.
we see in most English sentences.
So how do we make sense of them without getting our word order all twisted up?
Let's break it down.
Okay.
When we're asking about the person who performed an action,
Uh-huh.
we use who followed by the verb and then the object.
Sorry.
For example, who did you call?
Right.
But when we're asking about a thing,
Okay.
we use what followed by the subject and then the verb, as in what is your name or what
Right.
makes you happy.
So who is all about the action,
Yeah.
like focusing on who did something,
Uh-huh.
while what is more concerned with the subject itself,
Right.
asking what something is or what something does.
Exactly. It's a subtle but important distinction that
Yeah.
can make all the difference in crafting clear
Right.
and grammatically correct questions.
This is making me realize just how much thought goes into constructing even the simplest sentences.
It is. It's like a mental workout for
Yeah.
our language muscle.
The more we exercise those muscles,
Yeah.
the more effortlessly we can navigate the complexities of English
Mhm.
and express ourselves with clarity, confidence, and maybe even a touch of creativity.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here,
We have.
from basic word order principles
Yeah.
to the nuances of questions and negative sentences.
Mm-hmm.
But before we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I'm curious, are there any common pitfalls
Yeah.
or mistakes that learners often make when it comes to these grammatical structures?
There are a few that pop up quite frequently,
Okay.
and they're often related to those subtle shifts in word order that we've been discussing.
Yeah.
One common mistake is using incorrect verb forms in questions, particularly with those tricky third-person singular subjects.
Yes.
Do you remember those?
I remember struggling with this when I first started learning English.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to remember to add that S to the verb after he, she, or it,
Yeah,
especially in questions.
absolutely.
It's a small but significant detail
Mhm.
that can make a big difference in the grammatical accuracy of a sentence.
For example, a learner might incorrectly say, she don't like coffee,
Okay.
instead of she doesn't like coffee.
So it's all about remembering that does is the VIP auxiliary verb
Yeah.
for those third-person singular subjects,
Hmm.
both in questions and in negative sentences.
Right.
What other pitfalls should we watch out for?
Another common mistake is misplacing not
Okay.
in negative sentences.
All right.
Remember,
Right,
not
right.
always snuggles up right next to that auxiliary verb, like
Yeah.
two peas in a pod.
Okay.
So saying, I like not coffee,
Yeah.
would be a big no-no.
It would. Yeah.
That sentence structure is grammatically incorrect.
Yeah.
But the correct way to phrase it would be, I do not like coffee. Or, more commonly, I don't like coffee.
So the not is like a little shadow
Yeah,
that always follows the auxiliary verb around.
I like that.
Any other common slip-ups that we should mention?
One more that often trips up learners is forgetting to invert the subject and auxiliary verb in questions.
Right.
It's easy to fall back on that familiar subject-verb-object order that we use in statements. But in questions, we got to shake things up a bit.
So instead of saying, he is going to the store,
Yeah,
we need to flip it to, is he going to the store?
precisely.
Okay.
That little flip is what signals that we're asking a question rather than making a statement. Right. And it applies to all types of questions, whether they're simple yes or no questions, questions with question words, or even those intriguing negative questions that we discussed earlier.
This is making me see how mastering these subtle shifts in word order, it's like unlocking this secret code to fluent English.
I like that.
But are there any tips or tricks that you can share
Sure.
for incorporating all these question and negation techniques
Yeah.
into everyday conversations?
The best way to internalize these structures is to practice.
Okay.
The more you use them in real-life situations, the more natural and effortless they will become.
So don't be shy.
Yeah.
Just go out there and start asking questions, expressing negation,
Yeah.
playing around with those question tags.
Exactly.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah, that's how we learn and grow.
Right.
Embrace those slip-ups
Yeah.
as opportunities to refine your skills.
Well said. It's all about the journey, not the destination, right?
Exactly.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today,
We have.
from the basics of word order to some advanced techniques for questions and negations.
Yeah.
What key takeaways should our listeners keep in mind
Okay.
as they continue their language learning adventure?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that word order in English, it's not just about following a set of rules. It's like a puzzle
Okay.
where each piece has to be in the right place for the picture to make sense.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And just like with a puzzle, once you understand how the pieces fit together,
Right.
you can start to see the bigger picture
Yeah.
and appreciate the elegance of the design.
Exactly.
And we've seen how those pieces, the subjects, verbs, auxiliary verbs, not, and even those question words, they all have their designated spots in the word order dance.
Right.
Especially when we're forming questions in negative sentences.
Exactly. Mastering those basic structures is like learning the steps to a dance.
Right.
Once you have those down, you can move with more confidence and grace.
But we've also seen that there's room for creativity and personal style,
Absolutely.
like adding those tag questions
Yeah.
for a touch of flair, or using those negative prefixes to express a thought without even saying not.
Language isn't just about following rules. It's about using those rules as a springboard for expression.
Yeah.
For adding your own unique voice to the conversation.
I love that. It's like learning the rules of a game so you can then bend them strategically
Right.
to create surprising and delightful outcomes.
Exactly. And the more you explore the nuances of English word order,
Yeah.
the more you'll discover those hidden pathways to creativity and expression.
Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I have to ask,
Yeah.
any parting words of wisdom for our listeners?
Sure.
Any challenges they can take on to further explore this magic of word order?
Absolutely. Here's a thought-provoking challenge for you.
Okay.
Next time you're reading a book, watching a movie, or even just listening to a conversation, pay close attention to how people use questions and negative sentences.
Okay.
Notice those subtle shifts in word order, the different ways that they emphasize certain words or ideas,
Right.
and the overall impact those choices have on the meaning and tone of the message.
That's a great idea. It's like becoming a language detective, observing the masters at work and learning their secrets.
Exactly. And who knows, you might even discover some new tricks and techniques that you can incorporate into your own communication style.
Well, I think we've thoroughly unpacked the world of English word order for questions and negative sentences today.
We have.
We've explored the rules, the nuances, the exceptions, and even some fun ways to play with language.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've seen how those seemingly simple structures can create a world of meaning and expression,
Right.
and how mastering them can empower you to communicate with greater clarity, confidence, and creativity.
It's been a great deep dive.
So to our listeners, I say go forth and experiment.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask questions, to challenge assumptions, to play with word order, and to embrace the endless possibilities of the English language.
And remember, the journey of language learning is never truly finished.
That's true.
There's always something new to discover, some hidden depth to explore, some fresh perspective to gain. So stay curious, stay engaged, and keep those language muscles flexing.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of English word order.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, happy exploring.